Welcome back to the Next Mission podcast. I'm your host, Alex Leonovich. Today we're going to answer one of the biggest questions that eventually every homeowner asks. What is my house really worth? This is especially important if you're thinking about selling your home, because the big difference between what you want your house to sell for and what it's actually worth is what we're going to be talking about today. What we're going to be talking about specifically is market value. We're going to talk about comparable properties, what we in the real estate industry call comps. And we're going to talk about after repair value, or you might hear it ARV, which is the value of your home after you've repaired it and brought it up to as close to new as possible, a complete renovation. And we're going to talk about something that can make determining the value of your home really difficult, and that's emotion. Because we're going to be talking about the home, this isn't just a building, right? It's personal. And here's the question I want you to really think about. If you want your home, if you put your home on the market tomorrow, what evidence would you have to support your asking price? So that's really what this episode's about today. We're not guessing, we're not hoping, we're not picking the highest number we can find online. We're understanding the market. And because you're selling your biggest asset, you don't want to guess about what that is. You really want to understand it. So let's start with emotion. And this is something that is completely understandable. We all understand because we've lived in homes. We grew up in homes. You may have a home that you raised your family in. You've spent years renovating it, maybe decades. You may remember the day you brought your first child home, or you brought your children home to the house. Or maybe it's the place that you hosted Thanksgiving every single year. And maybe you built that backyard pool and it was exactly what you wanted at that stage in life with your kids where they really enjoyed it. And all these things that I'm talking about have tremendous value to you. But here's the problem. The market doesn't understand your memories, and it doesn't assign a dollar value to them. That's where we have to separate the emotion or the emotional value from the market value. You may feel that your home is worth $650,000. You may need $650,000 because you're using the proceeds to buy your next home. You may have invested $150,000 in renovations, and you think that your investment should automatically be reflected in the selling price. The market asks different questions. What will the buyer actually pay for the property today? That's really what we're looking for. It's really what we're trying to understand. And that's why we really need a methodology as we go into this. So here's how I explain it to sellers. You walk into your home and say, I think it's worth $600,000. That's an opinion. I hope it's worth $600,000. That's also an opinion. But if we take the property and we apply it against a consistent valuation methodology using comparable sales, now we're doing something very different. We're building a case. We're creating a defensible estimate of market value based on evidence. And that's the difference between an opinion and an analysis. The goal isn't to find the number that makes everyone feel good. The goal is to find a number that the market can support. So what does the methodology actually look like? I like to think of it as a series of steps. First, you have to define the subject property, right? You need to understand exactly what you're valuing. And this comes down to facts and figures that you can easily find. So it's the living area, the age of the property, the lot size, the numbers of bedrooms and bathrooms, the construction, is it block, is it wood, its condition currently. And does it have things like a pool or a garage? Is it on waterfront? Does it have a dock? Does it have Gulf access if you're down here in the greater Tampa area or in Florida? What renovations have been done recently? What's the age of the roof? What's the age of the HVAC or the AC? And all of the other characteristics that could materially affect what the buyer is willing to pay. Okay. So now we identified what the property is. Now let's establish comparable property criteria. So what are we going to compare our property to? And we want to do this as an apples to apples, not an apples to oranges. This is extremely important. Whenever the market allows, we want to start with properties that are sold in the last 90 days, are located within a half a mile of the home you're trying to sell. Some of the other things that we do is we don't cross major roads or major highways. And the reason we do this is the highway or the neighborhood to the north may be completely different age and other characteristics from the one to the south. And then we want to use measurable characteristics of the property, and we want to stay within, for some of these, we want to stay within about 20%. So, for example, you have a 2,000 square foot house. 20% of that means we're going to compare it to something as low as 1,600 square feet and as high as 2,400 square feet. If there are a lot of comparables, we'll shrink that number down maybe to 1,800 to 2,200. And maybe we're lucky and we have a number in the neighborhood that were all built about the same time. They're all about 22,000 square feet. And then it's easy. Then we don't have to use that 20%. If we're looking at property, let's say it's on a half an acre, 0.4 to 0.6, right? 20%. And then if we're looking at a house, we look at, for age, we want to do it within about 20%. So let's say a house built in 2000, we would go maybe down to 1980 and 2020, right? I would prefer maybe 10 years, 1990 to 2010, but you get the idea. Now, when it comes to bedrooms and bathrooms, we drop the 20%. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath is not comparable to a 4-bedroom, 2-bath or a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, right? That doesn't make sense, and we don't do that. So we keep those characteristics similar. Those are really functional characteristics. The same thing applies to unique features. When we have a pool home, we don't compare a pool home to a non-pool home. If we had to, I usually, if it's an older pool, not brand new, I usually drop the price about $50,000 from a pool home to a non-pool home. Pools these days often are $100,000 or more, so if you have a brand new home with a brand new pool, now you're probably going to have to add or subtract $100,000. Waterfront matters, a dock matters. Those are functional characteristics that can't change. In a property on the water, on the Gulf, something with a pond in the backyard, on a golf course, it's really hard to compare that to one that is not similar. So you gotta be looking for, again, like comparables, apples to apples. Garages matter. A 2-car garage is not comparable to a 1-car garage. And the condition of the property really matters. So we're not looking for homes that are necessarily just close together, same neighborhood, same street, although sometimes those are very comparable. They were all built about the same time, about the same size, etc. We're looking for properties that are functionally and physically comparable, okay? So, and that's, again, gets back to the apples to apples. So let's spend a little more time on the 90-day window. when I'm evaluating a property, I don't want to rely heavily on what happened 6 months or 9 months ago. The market changes. If you've looked in the last 12 months, things began to really slow down last summer, and they started picking up in second quarter of this year. So something 6 months, 9 months, a year ago may have been a completely different price than it is today and what the market would support. Interest rates have changed. Inventory has changed. Buyer demand is changing, and for the better right now here in the greater Tampa area. Insurance costs change. We're 2 years going on into our third year since Hurricane Milton. So things and the way people see it, recent memory, the farther we get from that, the more it'll change. And the competitive landscape, it really, can change also. So the question isn't, what did homes like mine sell for at some point, right? And sometimes you'll see that. You'll see people using comparables that are 6 months, a year old, and I think that's disingenuous. And that's why I give you the 90 days and a half a mile. The better question we really should be asking is, what are buyers paying for properties like mine right now, right? Or in the recent memory. So last 90 days, 3 months. And that's why we really want to focus, again, on those recent sales. So the same principle also applies to distance. We don't want to go farther than a half a mile. A half a mile keeps us in the same neighborhood. It keeps us within the general area of town or the city. It keeps us in a similar community, a similar environment. If it's rural, it's rural. If it's urban, it's urban. And again, we don't want to cross highways. We don't want to cross major roads because oftentimes they're very, very different. And there are markets, even here in Florida, where you won't have enough comparable sales. But when we can, we need to keep it to as small an area as possible, preferably same street, same neighborhood. Sometimes you can get a little outside of that and you're still within that half a mile, but the closer the better. Same neighborhood, same subdivision, same street, like surrounding properties, right? And if we can, sometimes same side of the street. And the reason that's important here in Florida and in the greater Tampa Bay area is one side of the street could be flood zone X and the other side of the street could be flood zone AE. And we talked about that in a previous episode. So things can, 50 meters can make a big difference. And so the closer, the better. You may find, even on Zillow, properties that are the same 2 miles away, 5 miles away. But they're just not the same. The neighborhood's not the same. And if you're not from the Tampa area, there are some very expensive neighborhoods that have 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, 1,500 square feet. And we have some other neighborhoods that aren't so wonderful, that are full of 3-bedroom, 2 bathroom, 1,500 square feet homes, and they're not the same. So now let's talk about condition. In our last episode, connects directly with this one here for this discussion. In episode 11, we talked about pre-inspections and understanding the condition before you buy, right? So if you didn't see that one, go back, check out episode 11. But why does that matter? Because condition affects value. Imagine 2 homes, both 2,000 square feet. One has a new roof, updated kitchen, new HVAC, new flooring, new paint, completely renovated. The other has the original roof, it's 20 years old, original kitchen, original bathroom, and a lot of deferred maintenance. And while they still have very similar characteristics, both functional and otherwise, you can tell right off that they're not the same. And so that's why we are preparing your home for sale for sale and determining its value. And we talked about during the last episode also that, or a couple of the previous episodes, where if you come in at market value, your house is going to sell here between 40 and 60 days here in Tampa right now. If you are above market value, you might as well get comfortable, because it's probably going to be between 5 and 6 months before that home sells, and you are going to be forced at some point to drop the price to market value, and oftentimes below market value. And so this is some of the reasons why I get nervous and or concerned, and you should too, when somebody says, my neighbor sold their house for $300 per square foot, so my house must be worth $300 per square foot. And again, that's not necessarily true. Price per square foot is a useful metric. If you really want to refine comparables, sometimes that's really good, but it's not a way to value. It's not a valuation metric or formula. It's what we do when we've found the comparables and we can really translate and define, this square footage, same characteristics at this value based on a sale, and another house, similar characteristics and a sale. And you can just divide price sold by square footage and you get the price per square foot. But if it's a larger home, it will oftentimes have a lower price per square foot than a smaller home. Again, unless the price jumps radically, it's a multiplication problem, and a similar price divided by more square footage is going to be smaller. And as we talked about, waterfront and things like that can have a completely different price per square foot, because you're not just paying for the house and the land, or you're paying for the house and the land, but the land has greater value because it's on the water. And oftentimes, and rightly so, a fully renovated house will have a different price per square foot than one that isn't renovated. So we don't want to just take price per square foot as a comparable. We're still getting back. It's got to be apples to apples, and it's got to be house to house. Now let's talk about one of the most common conversations that I have with sellers, and it usually starts with something like, my neighbor sold their house for $650,000. Again, very similar to my neighbor, got $300 per square foot for their house. And although that's useful, especially if their house is a good comparable, what I want to know is, when did they sell? What condition was the house in? How large was the lot? Did they have a pool? Was it renovated? Was it on waterfront? Did they have a dock? Those are the things that tell me whether or not I can compare it. And they could be just down the street. I've seen plenty of houses on the water that have pools or don't have pools, have a dock and a boat lift or don't. And so even if they have a lot of similar, they're still not comparable, right? We can come up with some math and maybe we can get close, but I would rather use a better comparable than start subtracting value of pool and other things to try to come to some comparable. And usually what we find in those cases is the houses aren't similar, right? It'd be nice, and we get excited when we see the house down the street sell for a lot of money. But here's the thing that I find when I'm doing open houses. I oftentimes have neighbors that come by the open house. And why? They've never been in the house before. They don't know what their neighbor did or had done to the house. They have a guess, but they've never been in the backyard. They've never seen, any of the renovations and things like that. And so they're oftentimes surprised. I had one just a couple weeks ago. Next door neighbor hadn't seen the inside of their neighbor's house. And so the opportunity to see it and see how it was decorated and see if it looked like theirs inside and get some input, some data on what their house might be worth is something that is is of interest to many people on your street or in your neighborhood. So now we've identified comparable properties, but here's another point that we should really talk about. No two properties are exactly alike. This is where the adjustments come into the analysis. So let's take a simple example. Suppose your property has a pool, but one of our strongest comparables, sales, does not, right? And we talked about it. So again, I use $50,000. Newer pool, more expensive. But let's say you have a pool that's 15 years old, 20 years old, it's been well taken care of. I usually use about $50,000 here in Florida. A lot of homes have pools here in Florida, so it's not as big a deal as some other areas of the country. But still, to replace it, to put in a new one, a small pool is $75,000, $80,000, and they can go upwards of $150,000 to $200,000. So something that is great. There is a math problem for it, but I don't know if I would. It's a starting point. I don't know if I would trust it and tell you it's chapter and verse. It's something you can bank on every single time you want to do this type of analysis. And just because it has a pool doesn't mean all pools are the same, or that the home with a pool is going to give you the same value as another home with a pool in the same neighborhood. I've bought a couple of homes with pools, and you have to be really careful because oftentimes they need to be refinished. They need a lot of work done to them. And so you buy this pool and you still got about $20,000 you got to put into it to get it up to a level where it's quote unquote nice again. So a lot of pitfalls that I've experienced in the pool world. What else? So roof and HVAC are another couple items that you can do a little math problem with. If it's older than about 15 years, I usually calculate in a new roof. Now I do a lot of investment stuff, so I'm looking at rentals. I'm looking at not wanting to have to replace it anytime in the near future. And again, I told you the story an episode or two ago where I bought a house, 25 years. The roof was supposed to be good for 40. I thought I was good, and the bank made me replace my roof within 90 days of buying it. So it's a big ticket item, and I would expect if you're a buyer that will be part of your calculus as you make an offer. And I would expect as a seller, you should probably go into it knowing that if you've got an older roof, that the buyer is going to want to use that as part of their negotiations, and it's probably fair. I always, for a 15-year roof, I usually factor in about $15,000. If a HVAC is older than 5 years old, usually the warranty is only to 10. So I'm probably going to factor in another $5,000 to $10,000 for a new AC system, and I'm going to want to negotiate that as part of the price if I'm supporting a buyer, or it's a recommendation that I would prepare my seller for, that they're going to need to understand that they have older systems that could go bad sooner rather than later, and they need to expect that a buyer is not going to want to walk in and pay top dollar only to have to replace that in the next couple of years. So there you have it. There's my pool, HVAC, and roof math. So what else? Some prices down here. Usually I factor in, you need an HVAC 1 ton for every 500 square feet. So if you have a 1,500 square foot home, you need a 3-ton HVAC. And I usually factor between $3,000 and $4,000 per ton. So a 1,500 square foot home is going to need a $9,000 to $12,000 HVAC. Again, that may be some of the calculus that the buyer uses to negotiate with a seller who has an older HVAC. And we talked about $15,000 to $20,000 for a roof, and you can see where that is. Again, it's easy when you've renovated a house and you have a new roof and you have a new HVAC and you're selling it. Those go quick. When you don't, you have an older home. Those are there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of concerns, there's a lot of risk, and that plays a part in the negotiation and the ultimate sale of the home. So when you meet with a real estate agent, they will do a competitive market analysis, often referred to as a CMA. And a CMA will find you comparable properties. It uses the MLS and it finds those like properties, and it's a starting point. And it's a way to compare the house down the street and those other things that we've just been discussing over the last 10 or 15 minutes. So current value versus after repair value. That's the next topic I want to go into. So let's take this discussion one step further. What happens when a house needs significant renovation? And that's where the after repair value comes in. A seasoned realtor who has relationships with general contractors and the trades probably has a pretty good idea of what a new roof and most parts of a renovation will cost. After repair value says everything's been fixed. Everything looks new inside, new floors, new paint, new hardware, probably new doors, new windows, new AC, everything. Top to bottom looks like a new home. Outside and inside, fresh landscaping, the whole 9 yards. So the ARV is that estimate of what would the property be when all that is done. So that's important if it's recent, okay? If you have a 30-year-old home that you've put $150,000 into it over 30 years, that is not the definition of after repair value. Only the things in the last 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years count in that calculus. And so that's why we really have to understand, and that's why when I'm looking at houses, those, the 4-point inspection, which we talked about, understanding the age of the roof and the age of the HVAC, if any electrical or plumbing has been updated, are key factors in that, right? When those things were purchased, when those things were replaced, and it all goes into it. So let's do an ARV calculation just for fun. So we'll use a simple example. Let's say a dated home could reasonably sell for $450,000 today. We identify several in the nearby area that were recently sold, fully renovated properties that suggest the property could be worth upwards of $600,000 after renovation. So we have a current value of $450,000. We have an ARV of $600,000, and that $150,000 difference is interesting, right? But it doesn't mean you have $150,000 worth in profit just sitting on your property. You still have to determine, and I know this isn't probably very confusing, but you got to factor in what it would take to take it from $450,000 to $600,000. Now, probably not all of that would be required in materials and labor to do that. But the investment, probably maybe 2/3 of it would be. Let's say it would take $100,000 in repairs and renovations to make it worth $600,000. So now you have a $50,000 profit. But that's not even the profit, right? We're still not done. There may be financing costs, holding costs, insurance, taxes, closing costs, seller's costs. Sellers oftentimes, at least in this area, will help to pay for some of the buyer's agent's commission as part of a sale. And perhaps the most important part is risk, right? To do a renovation like that is probably several months in work. If you started that here in Tampa in June, you'd be doing your whole renovation through hurricane season, right? What's the risk that all your work and all your investment get destroyed or damaged, parts of that have to be replaced at the same time. So the real question you have to ask if you're looking at what my house is currently valued, what it could be at ARV, and am I willing to take on that risk? Is it worth my time, my money, and the risks associated to try to get a higher value? And if I can afford to do that, or sell it as is on the market. So you might be asking, why does ARV matter if I'm just trying to sell my house? It matters because sometimes the seller has a decision to make. Do I sell the property as is, or do I invest it to make those renovations? And as we just talked about, that's not always an easy example or easy decision. We also, for a buyer, they may be looking at, do I want to pay full price $600,000 for a fully renovated home, move-in ready, or do I want to take on the responsibilities of buying a less expensive house at $450,000, but knowing that although I can live in it, I'm going to be living and working around and investing another $100,000 to potentially get a $50,000 bit of equity in my home over time. And those are questions. Some people enjoy that. Some people look for that as an opportunity to build that equity that I just talked about. They look at, and most of us, all of us should look at homes as a long-term investment. But others know themselves. They know that they would rather spend their free time doing the things that they want to do, and they would rather work hard and pay for that larger house so that they don't have to go through the time, the financial investment, and the risks associated with renovating their house while they're living in it. So here's one other final point that I'll hit on ARV. ARV is an estimate of market value after renovation. It is not set in stone. It is not take it to the bank. It is our best estimate based on comparable sales of fully renovated homes like the one you're looking at. Can't take me to court over it. I'm doing my best. But again, over time, the market changes, buyer demand changes, and somebody that did it and got top dollar, that may not be your situation even 6 months later. So it's definitely not a guarantee. It isn't dollar for dollar. And sometimes we can put a whole bunch of money into something and we're not getting the value that we thought. And it's something we just have to live with. So really think through those kind of decisions as you're entering a market. Talk to experienced professionals, have experienced professionals on your team that you're building, and really take the time to understand how design changes affect it, what styles people are moving towards. I'll give you a quick example. Everybody used to love, that natural wood look on their kitchen cabinets. Then it went to the last couple of years, white shaker. Everybody wants white shaker, and black hardware. And now it's changing back, and now everybody wants gold in their bathrooms and their kitchens. So if you can stay ahead of that curve and be on the cutting edge and be where people are moving towards, great. You invest a bunch of money and everybody wants to go with different colors. Maybe it's they may not find it as attractive as you thought they would. Or you may invest in things that people just don't care about. Some people care about that stuff. Others are, minimalists, and maybe they don't care whether it's gold or they hate white. I don't know. There's different people out there, and They have different likes and dislikes, and sometimes we get caught without the chair when the music stops, so to speak. I want to hit danger of overpricing one more time. So in the Tampa area, and we just ran the numbers for Berkshire Hathaway over first and second quarter of 2026. And what we found is if you do comparables correctly and you find the market value, let's say it's $600,000, that's market value. That's what people will pay. If you set it at $600,000, it will sell between 40 and 60 days. Without price reductions, people will buy it and there will be demand. If you decide that despite knowing the market value is $600,000 and you want to try to get more for it, a lot of it based on emotion, and you set it at $650, what we're seeing is you will sit there at $650 for a while, and then you will be recommended to do a price cut to $625 and then to $615 and $605, and approximately 150 days later at $575, because people here are waiting, they know the value of the house, somebody will make an offer for you less than market value, and you will have paid insurance, you will have lost $25,000, you will have paid your mortgage for 5 or 6 more months, etc. And you really got to ask yourself, is it worth it? I will tell you no. I don't want to get less for my house than it's worth, nor do I want to throw off my timeline of moving by 6 months, nor do I want to pay my mortgage an extra 6 months when I have a plan and a goal to be someplace else, right? And we talked about that early in episode 1 or 2 and 3. It's about motivation. When you decide to sell your house, you have a place and a time where you need to be. And your real estate agent and your whole team, quite frankly, is there to get you to that place at that time and sell your house. And if you can't make that happen, it throws everything into chaos. And you don't want to be there. Your agent doesn't want to be there. No one on your team wants to be there. So remember that, at least if you're listening to this and you're in the greater Tampa Bay area. Every market's different. Ours is telling us do good market valuation and stick to that valuation and your house will sell. What else can we talk about? Got some notes here. If you'd like to see the numbers I just talked about, I'm going to have them posted on my website. Please look in the show notes and you can check them out. I have the flyer and I scanned it in for you to take a look at. It's what we are sharing with our clients here in Tampa for Berkshire Hathaway. It's based on our numbers, and we have looked hard at sales and times and price reductions and all of that. And then we're training our agents to do the right thing and value it, and if necessary, walk away from a deal, because we don't want to be associated with telling you something and then watching you go through this painful process of 150 days and selling your home for less than its market value. That's something another agent can help you do that. We're really not interested in getting on that ride. So finish up here. Pricing your home isn't just putting a number against it. It's a strategy. It's based on a valuation methodology that considers recent sales. It takes into consideration condition, and it's being very focused on what buyers are comparing your house to. We want to be knowledgeable of what that is. We want to be one step ahead, and we want to be able to negotiate on your behalf for you the best possible deal for your home. Some of you will say, well, I get on Zillow, I see the Zestimate on Zillow. How good is that? Well, it's okay. I would call it a starting point. AI can do a lot of things, but it only sees what's been put in, the data it's given, the photos it's been given, and AI is great, but sometimes it's off, and you definitely need a human being that's comparing those homes and confirming that Zestimate is accurate. If you can do that, great, but I know your agent can do it, right? And can confirm either that Zillow is accurate or Zillow is not accurate. What should your agent actually be doing when it comes to home valuation? They should help put together the evidence for you. They should help you understand the evidence. They should get into detail and explain to you the comparable properties so it makes sense to you. They should explain why certain properties are included and why they aren't included. And they should help you understand who the buyer pool is based on market demand at that point in time, whenever that is. And as I just explained earlier, they should be willing to tell you the truth. And I hope when they tell you the truth, you hear it and you understand it. Because there's nothing worse than a house that isn't selling because of price, especially. And especially if that price is known, the market value is known, but we're not working with that market valuation. Part of their job is to give you that hard truth. It's not always comfortable. It may take you back. It may make you question your agent. But what I would tell you is you're going to sign a contract for 6 months in most cases. Are you going to trust the person that tells you what you want to hear and goes with your price to get you to sign the contract, or are you interested in the agent that is going to break down the facts for you and maybe tell you that your house isn't worth as much as you think it is, and is going to be honest with you? So wrapping up, the message for today is get a competitive market analysis on your home. You don't want to consider your home's worth with emotion. You want to use it on market valuation. Your feelings are definitely real, and your memories are real, and the money you've invested over time is real, but those things don't equal market valuation. And that's why you have an objective, professional real estate agent working on your behalf. Your market value has to be supported with evidence. You need to really define that property, use those recent transactions, and keep it geographically close. And really compare measurable characteristics and compare functional characteristics. And those were all the things we kind of talked today about. So here's your mission for this week. I always like to give a mission for each of these videos. If you're thinking about selling your home, put your emotions aside for a moment. Really seek the evidence that supports your home's value. Ask for those comparables. Make sure that your agent is using last 90 days, half a mile, unless you live way out in the country or something and that isn't realistic. There's some exceptions to every rule. Make sure that they're comparing apples to apples, 3-bedroom, 2 baths to 3-bedroom, 2 baths. If it's on the waterfront, it's on the waterfront. It's not, don't use those as comparables. And then have a hard discussion with your agent on, what is the ARV and where does mine stand, and what do they think needs to be done to get it up to the ARV, and do we think it's worth the cost and the risk and the time to do that, or should we just sell it as is? So in closing, again, I'm Alex Leonovich. I'm a realtor and real estate investor here in Tampa. I work with Berkshire Hathaway Florida Properties Group. I'm in the Palm Harbor office. If you found today's episode useful, please share it with somebody who may be thinking about selling their home. I think they'd find this of value. And remember, if you're in the greater Tampa Bay area and you'd like to discuss your house, I'd love to have the opportunity to be a resource for you as you're going through this process. Because the more you know before you start your next mission of selling your home, the better prepared you're going to be successful. You don't have to be ready to sell to go through this process either, right? This can be something that can be done months in advance at your timeline until you're comfortable. So these are those things that you can be looking at, you can be thinking about, and as a realtor, that's what I'm here for, to be that resource for you. So seek out a professional, an experienced professional, and let them prove to you their value as a real estate agent to work through this with you. Preparing your home for sale is a big deal. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of thought, and there's some hard decisions that you're going to have to make. But if you go through this process and you use the methodology and you stay away from the emotion and stick to the facts, you'll be successful. Until our next episode, I'm Alex Leonovich, and this is the Next Mission Podcast, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.